Welcome into another edition of our Big 12 preview series. Today we are joined by John Kurtz from the Kansas City Sports Network and the John Kurtz Show on YouTube, and we're talking Kansas State here in 2023. John, thanks for the time. What's going on, brother?
Hey, BK, I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me, man. Anytime.
I appreciate you joining me, man. Big fan of your work, and you're all over K-State. You're the best insider that I know for K-State. So it's an honor to have you on. And look, obviously you guys are coming off of a great year, a Big 12 championship, a 10-win season. It feels like the enthusiasm in Manhattan is high, and it feels like Chris Klieman has done a tremendous job with that program. He's going into his fifth year in Manhattan. And look, they say it's never easy to replace a legend, but the job that this guy has done has been incredibly impressive. And it just feels like you almost expect K-State to be a contender in this Big 12 conference year in and year out.
Yeah, he finally got over the hump last year. I think it was clear when he came in, he did a great job with he's kind of almost a modernized version of Bill Snyder, like a guy that can do it in 2023 with the transfer portal and NIL and just in a different way. You have to coach kids in a different way. Bill Snyder was much more the, lay the law down kind of guy, my way or the highway. And Klieman's all about culture and being about the players and letting them have a lot of buy-in. But at the same time, I mean, look, he's a defensive guy. He's based on playing defense. He bases his program on bringing up the three-star guys and kind of diamond in the rough sort of players, although the recruiting has gotten much better. And I think that's a part of what is happening here. But in general, the same tenets of the program are there, like toughness, consistency. They're not going to beat themselves too much. They definitely want to run the ball, and they also are going to play some pretty good defense. But there's been an evolution, and I think a couple things happened last year that really helped. I mean, one, you had the apex of both Felix, Anudike-Uzomah, and Deuce, Vaughn, who were stars on both sides of the ball. And those were guys that were three-star recruits. I mean, Felix was about to go to Mizzou to be a student and not even play football when they got him on campus. So I mean, he really is a wild story. Deuce had some people after him, but not quite the Texases, for instance, of the world, despite being there not too far away. So you had the apex of those guys, and then evolution of Klieman as a coach. He got rid of Courtney Messingham as the offensive coordinator last year, who had run, I would call it like a more archaic sort of offense. And they made Colin Klein, obviously former Heisman finalist quarterback, the OC. And I think that was huge. That combined with Will Howard coming in for Adrian Martinez and being just a totally different guy at quarterback, all of a sudden they just had so much higher of a ceiling than they had before with the offense, and that actually an ability to sling the ball around, which is something we really hadn't seen much at K-State. So I think the fan expectation going into last year was like, hey, this team has some of the pieces to potentially be there as a 9 or 10 win team and push for a Big 12 title, but can he actually get over that hump? Because he had 8 win seasons in the non-COVID years before last year that he had been there. COVID year got a little wonky. They had all sorts of weird stuff going on, and it was a rough season. But outside of that, solid 8-win campaigns, but can you take that next step? And he did, obviously getting them the Big 12 championship and getting to the Sugar Bowl to play Alabama. And now I think the expectation, I've honestly been a little bit surprised at how the expectations have been this year, nationally, regionally, et cetera. Like people are a little higher on K-State than I anticipated this year with the losses, because they lost some studs, man. I mean, Deuce and Felix that I just mentioned, but Julius Brents at corner was a second-round pick of the Colts. I mean, they had some really high-end talent that needs to be replaced, but it seems like the expectation is that they are going to be right there in the conversation again. And to me, the whole storyline for this year is going to be, look, the depth of talent across the board on this roster is so much better than it has been in the last 5 to 10 years, basically back to the days of Colin Klein, because recruiting got so dry at the end of the Bill Snyder era. They've done a great job of restocking that and actually getting kids that have legitimate other P5 offers into the program. But it's, do you have the star power? Do you have the star power to replace the guys that I just mentioned that they lost last year? And I think they have some great candidates, namely like Treshaun Ward at running back, who's a Big 12 newcomer of the year offensively. Transfer from Florida State would be a part of the Deuce Vaughn replacement there. But can those guys actually step in and be stars? Because I think you'll need some of that to get all the way back to Arlington for the Big 12 championship game.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Look, I'm a Cowboys fan, so it's nice that I actually get to root for Deuce Vaughn instead of rooting against him like I have the last couple of years. I mean, that guy was a nightmare for Big 12 defenses in recent years. He's one of the most electric players in the country over the last few seasons. He's obviously off making things happen in the preseason right now in the NFL, and I know Cowboys fans are pumped to have him, and I feel like he's going to be a really, really good player in the league for a number of years. But yeah, I mean, what's the plan to replace Deuce Vaughn? You brought up Ward. I mean, are you guys confident? Are you confident that the K-State run game, which is such a staple of Kansas State football, isn't going to take a major step back despite losing an NFL caliber running back in Deuce Vaughn?
I don't think the running game specifically will take a major step back. I'll frame it like that. I think the question with the offense is like, does Deuce, all the attention that Deuce drew, even when he didn't have the ball in his hands, does that cause the offense to take a step back in general across the board? I think as far as the running game goes, they're going to be fine. And a big part of that is, I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention they have the entire offensive line back from last year. And that's one place where they have recruited really well. They've developed really well. I think they just have a ton of depth there. And leading the charge is maybe the best player in the conference. Now, I say that just from a overall potential and NFL potential standpoint. Cooper Beebe is going to be an All-American interior offensive lineman, just a tremendous player. You'll look at various rankings out there. Many have him as the best interior offensive lineman in the country. And he's a guy that can move around and play anywhere. He's played outside as well in his career. So he'll be the guy leading the charge. But all those guys, they really paved the way last year and did an awesome job. So I think that'll help. But also, I mean, DJ Giddens gets kind of overlooked. He was a guy last year that was Deuce Vaughn's backup and put up really good numbers. He had over 600 yards rushing and was really impressive against Alabama, actually. Now, it was when the game had started to get a little bit out of hand, but he was making some Alabama defenders look pretty silly in that Sugar Bowl, which I think gave people a lot of hope heading into this year that he was going to be a guy. And that was before they landed Treshaun Ward, very highly coveted transfer from Florida State, who kind of just got Wally pipped, got injured, lost his job after he had been a dude that was really the guy there in Tallahassee. And they obviously have tons of talent and a good team this year. So I think the running game will be all right. And I think Treshaun Ward can even replace some of what Deuce did in the passing game too, because that's an or an underlooked part of what Deuce did and brought to the table is like, that's a guy that could really catch it out of the backfield. They exploited that a lot, got him out in space. And I think Ward brings some of those capabilities. I mean, nobody is going to be as shifty and elusive as Deuce Vaughn, but I think that combination, you can do a pretty good job of replacing them. So I expect that they will probably be fine in the running game. To me, the question will just be like, overall, does the offense still operate the same without defenses having to worry about where Deuce Vaughn is on every single snap?
Yeah, the O-line is ridiculous. How much did you have to pay Cooper Beebe to keep him on campus? Did you guys start a GoFundMe? Because that guy could have gone pro, right? Like he was projected to be a top 2-day pick in the NFL draft, but he kind of surprised everyone and decided to come back. Did you pony up some of your own money, John, to make that happen?
Well, if I could have, I would have. I definitely someone should hit me up if I can help get guys to stick around. He probably would have been a day 2 pick. I think had he gone, there are a couple factors working there. One, I mean, he said a lot of his motivation was that he wanted to be in the Ring of Honor, which I'm sure he's going to be because assuming he stays healthy, he's going to be an All-American again. He'll be a multi-time All-American and be up there. But the other factor is this really helped out K-State, I think, in what was working there. His little brother is now starting as a freshman at K-State. And so I think he wanted to get a year in playing with his little brother. And that was definitely a pull to keep him around too. But, his dad is really involved, not only just like on social media, but just a really fun guy. He's done some interviews and talked quite a bit about it. And even he said he was sort of surprised. Like they were almost going to push him to go pro, but it was really Cooper's decision to come back. So a lot of that's a testament to the culture that K-State has too. I mean, you look at the guys that they've had in the world that we're in right now, like Deuce, I'm sure was getting, some back channel offers to go places, decided to stick around. You have not seen, knock on wood, really anybody leave for that sort of reason at K-State yet, like greener pastures, more money somewhere else. And I think a lot of it is just because of the culture that Klieman's built. Like it can sound corny sometimes. And I'm usually more like a flash sort of guy. I prefer the flash, but you can't deny the culture that they have and the pull that it has. And that's probably something that you need at a place like K-State. And I think that helped there. Yeah,
I think it's a real thing. 100%. You brought up Will Howard a few minutes ago. Look, I'm a Texas fan. This is a Texas centric channel. I think any rational Texas fan would tell you that if Will Howard started the game and played all 4 quarters in that game against the Longhorns last year, K-State probably wins. But it was at a time of the year where Adrian Martinez was still kind of going back and forth with Will Howard. Howard took over in the second half of the season and never looked back. That guy closed out the year on a fantastic stretch. Obviously was huge in that Big 12 championship game win over TCU. Confidence with him has to be through the roof after what he put together towards the end of 2022.
No doubt. It's funny you bring that up. That's one of the most frustrating moments of the entire season for me last year. Like got to the point in the middle of the year, we're like screaming like, man, like Will is the guy. They had a offensive efficiency wise, when Will Howard was playing quarterback for K-State last year, they were the 5th best offense in the country. So, I mean, the numbers were pretty staggering. Like he was elite when it came to, and when I'm talking efficiency there, it's points per drive. So like they were putting the ball in the end zone, and it was becoming very apparent at that time. But back to the culture, I think that was like a Klieman wanted to stick with his guy and Adrian Martinez, who they loved a lot and didn't want to totally bail on him. But I agree with you. I think at least it's a much closer game. It's not K-State having to play from behind 3 touchdowns in that game if Will Howard is playing. But I think there's all the confidence in the world in him right now. He's very tight with Colin Klein. And one of the key points of the offseason was that Colin Klein got offered the offensive coordinator job at Notre Dame, decided to stay and come back. And Will Howard, I think, had a lot to do with that, kind of pulling at the heartstrings and convincing him to stick around. They also have a stud freshman quarterback coming in, Avery Johnson, who I think also played a role in that too, that Colin probably wanted to stick around and work with him. But I think year 2 of the offense with those two, you're going to see a lot of development there in terms of what they do, how creative they get, because that is something to keep in mind. Last year was just year 1, and Howard wasn't even the guy that they were prepping to be the starting quarterback at the beginning of the year now. He's got an entire offseason, to help fuel him. Keegan Johnson's a guy to watch out for too. He's an Iowa transfer that was almost the Big Ten freshman of the year a couple of years ago. Notre Dame, Texas A&M wanted him pretty badly in the portal, and K-State was able to get him. It's been rave reviews from everybody about what he's done in camp so far. And I think Malik Knowles had a lot of talent, but was never very consistent, oft injured, just sporadic, gave you production in spurts. And I think if they can get a guy like Keegan Johnson to really be more consistent in the receiver core, that'll help Will Howard too. But his guy is Ben Sinnott, who was a tight end that was excellent last year and Adrian Martinez wasn't utilizing him as much, so I think his numbers would look much more impressive had Will played the entire year. I think you're going to see that connection a lot this year. And that just with the confidence of Will Howard. Like, he is cerebral and confident. They'll tell you to a man he does not have the best arm talent in the quarterback room, not even close, but he's the most intelligent quarterback that they have, and he's the most confident and not afraid to just let it fly down the field, which is not something we've seen a lot of in Manhattan. So tons of confidence in him. Guys love him. I could not be happier for him selfishly. A guy that, I think 90% of college players these days would have transferred in the situation that he was in because of injuries to Skylar Thompson when he was a freshman in 2020. He got thrown in the fire way too early as a true freshman, a guy that needed to develop. So he got exposed. The fans turned on him, didn't like him. He had confidence issues in 2021. And K-State didn't believe in him because they brought in Adrian Martinez to be the quarterback last year. And he decided to stick around, and it paid off. And now he's a Big 12 champion quarterback with NIL deals and is going to be leading the defending Big 12 champs out onto the field this year. So couldn't feel better for him as a person, but also extremely confident in what he is as a quarterback.
Yeah, a guy that I worked with here in Austin used to call Will Howard, Will Spill the Pill Howard. Like, he was just known for turning it over all the time.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, and then he just cleaned it up last year, and obviously that was instrumental to his success. Before we get to defense, John, I brought up Texas a moment ago. I just remember growing up. I'm in my late 20s right now. We own Texas. Just hearing that chant nonstop. And it felt like K-State was our purple kryptonite, and we just could not get over the K-State hump. Well, the tides have turned in this series. Like, obviously, K-State won the Big 12 last year. I think Texas fans would trade the win over K-State for a Big 12 title in a heartbeat. But it's 6 years in a row the Longhorns have beaten K-State, and K-State hasn't won in Austin since 2011. Obviously, the matchup between these two teams is in Austin this year. I won't ask you to deep dive into Texas or anything like that, but look, these are projected to be the two top teams in this conference this year. How do you think K-State matches up talent-wise with Texas, and do you think this could be the year where K-State gets to reclaim owning Texas?
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because it feels like the baton just got passed from Texas to Oklahoma. Like, about the time that the K-State stopped beating Texas, they started beating Oklahoma, and it's completely flip-flopped the roles there. Yeah, Texas has been a bugaboo, man. We were doing our podcast earlier today, and we were kind of talking about that when we were going through game by game on the schedule. And like, man, the last two trips to Austin have been pretty excruciating losses. It felt like they definitely should have won in 21. They jumped out early in 19 and had a really good shot there in Chris Klieman's first year. I can remember a 2017 game that went to overtime and just some kind of archaic coaching by Bill Snyder and the way he was handling the clock. It's just been one thing after another in this Texas series. So it's been very frustrating. Look, I think the bottom line is, if we're talking about like how does K-State match up talent-wise, I don't think anybody in the conference comes close to touching Texas talent-wise. That to me is not the issue. And I agree with everybody. Like, if it's ever going to happen for Texas, I mean, I guess it's the last year in the Big 12, so this now or never anyway. But if it's ever going to happen where they get back over that hump and win the league, I mean, it definitely would be this year based on what they have on paper, I mean, that offense especially. I mean, my goodness. So K-State will have a tough time with that because we're about to talk defense, and defense is where there are more question marks, I think, with this team. So they'll have a hard time. And the game being in Austin, I think Texas, they'll probably have K-State will probably have Texas's full attention, I would imagine, based on the season that they had last year. So I think all those factors, it's going to be a really, really tough game. I think that's a really tough putt for K-State to win that game. I mean, can they do it? Sure. And I think what you're kind of hoping and thinking as a K-State fan is look, I mean, the book on Texas has been they'll find a way to stub their toe in a handful of games that they probably shouldn't. But looking at it right now, I think it's by far the most difficult game on K-State's schedule.
Yeah, that game November 4th in Austin. All right, you brought up the defense. You mentioned Felix Anudike-Uzomah, first-round pick. He's gone. Julius Brents, day 2 pick. Those guys were the stars. Those guys were the leaders on that K-State defense. But it's not only them. Only 5 returning starters on that side of the ball for the Wildcats this year. You mentioned it, some question marks on that side of the football. Maybe the good and the bad for K-State as we sit less than 2 weeks away from the season opener.
Yeah, I worry about the pass rush, and that's an obvious statement when you lose a first-round defensive end. But Khalid Duke, I think, will be maybe the biggest key to the entire defense. He's the guy that in 2019, right, Klieman takes over. He was the guy early on in the program, people were looking at and saying, okay, that guy's different. He looks different coming off the bus. He's the one that's built like he could be an NFL defensive end, and he had some real highlights early on in his career, and then has battled through it a little bit. Some injuries have slowed him down. And then Felix kind of took over as the guy. They've used Khalid Duke a little bit more as a kind of a hybrid, not totally just rushing the passer, but playing some linebacker. And it sounds like now he's going to be back hand in the ground, just rushing the passer. And I think that's where he is best. I think that's where they need him most. So if they can get consistent play out of him, I think he has the potential to be that sort of a replacement. But outside of that, I mean, Nate Matlack is a guy people have been excited about in the program for a while, but he's battled a ton of injuries and just has never really produced the way that they want him to. I think another key, Eli Huggins was a really good defensive tackle and did not get the recognition that he deserved, but he's a guy that was crucial in the goal line stand against TCU to help them win the Big 12 championship. They lost him. He had been in the middle of that defense for a long time, so they're going to need some guys to really step up there, and that is one of the things I worry about. They're strongest at linebacker. Again, kind of dependent on health. Daniel Green is an all Big 12 linebacker who last year, the guy's been around since, I believe he was in the 2017 recruiting class at K-State, if you can believe that. He's still around because last year he battled a foot injury. He had a rib injury. He was always hurt and just never had a chance to really unleash. And the year before that, even when he was great, he missed a couple of games because of targeting penalties. So he's always had something slowing him down too. But when he's out there, I think he's as good a linebacker as there is in the conference. Austin Moore was pretty good behind him. I think that's where they're best in terms of young talent that they're developing too. They have a lot of bodies they can throw out there at linebacker. And then the secondary, I mean, look, they're missing Julius Brents. That's a huge loss. They lost Echo Boydo, actually, their other corner. He might make the Chiefs roster. He started as just a camp invitee, and he right now is in the thick of a competition to earn a spot on the 53-man Chiefs roster. So they're missing both corners. Good news is Will Lee is stepping in as a JUCO corner, and he was a guy that Alabama chased after late, arguably the best junior college defensive back out there last year. So they have bodies that can step in there. Kobe Savage is coming back from injury. He actually got hurt in the Texas game last year, all Big 12 sort of safety that should be back. The thing I will say about the secondary is that they do have some talent there. Jacob Parrish, another young guy that they really like. And that is where they have been the best at figuring things out. I think Joe Klanderman, the defensive coordinator, is excellent with that. His background is working with guys in the secondary. And 3 years in a row, they've taken a transfer and turned him into an NFL draft pick. Josh Hayes was the guy last year who got taken by the Bucs in the 6th round. This year, they bring in Marcus Sigel from North Dakota State, so somebody that they obviously have some familiarity with, and they kind of feel like he's going to be the next plug-and-play dude back in the secondary, along with Savage, who's probably going to wind up getting drafted at some point, and then Lee. So it's about those guys filling in and actually making it happen, but I feel pretty good about the secondary. I feel very good about the linebackers, and I have big questions about what the pass rush is going to be.
Yeah, I think you're lying about Daniel Green. I think it's the 2012 recruiting class, not the 2017 recruiting class. It feels like that dude's been in college forever. And you're right. If he can stay on the field, he is one of the best players in the conference. So that would be huge for y'all. Last thing, John, before we let you go, and thanks again for joining me, man. This has been a ton of fun. Give me a ceiling and a floor for Kansas State in 2023.
Yeah, the schedule has been kind of an interesting topic. It feels almost like the ink blot test. I think they call it like the Rorschach test. Like two people can look at it and kind of see a different thing. Because for a while I was seeing the narrative out there like, oh, it's actually a pretty easy, favorable conference schedule that they have. I look at it and think like, not so sure about that. You know, they get two of the newcomers, but one of them is UCF. And I think UCF will be by far the best of the 4 incoming schools to the league this year. So I think that becomes a tricky game. Their non-con, honestly, is low-key a little bit tricky. They have a road trip to Mizzou, and I think Missouri will be better. I don't think it's going to be the same Mizzou team that got walloped 40-12 last year by K-State. And they also have Troy at home. I believe Troy won 12 games last year. I know it was a double-digit win season for Troy. And K-State has stubbed their toe. Well, look at last year. They lost to Tulane at home in the non-con. They lost to Arkansas State in 2020. So that's unfortunately been a bugaboo for Klieman. So that'll be a tricky thing. They've got to go to Kansas at the end of the year, who hasn't beaten K-State since George W. Bush was our president. So Kansas is going to want that one pretty badly. I do think the schedule will present them some problems and is a little bit tougher than people thought at first. They have to go to Lubbock, and I think Texas Tech is going to. We talked about Austin, right? Like, so I think the schedule is fairly tough. I would say your ceiling is like if all comes together and the offense is as good as we think it is and the playmakers do emerge on defense, they probably have a ceiling of being like an 11-1 regular season team. I think the floor, if we're going floor, I think like Klieman has never, outside of the COVID year, been worse than 7-5 in the regular season. I think it would take a lot going wrong to be any worse than that. And honestly, I kind of fall right in the middle. I mean, my expectation for this team is to be about 9-3, compete, be close to getting back to Arlington for the Big 12 championship game, but I'm not quite there. They took some big hits with some real stars that were in this program, and I will just need to be convinced that they can recoup some of the star power that I think will be necessary to get to Arlington. So I think that's kind of your barometer for expectations. Although I floated out there, The Athletic, I think, predicted K-State to go 9-3, and they listed it all out. You beat KU, you beat Mizzou. I think they had them losing to like Tech, Texas, and UCF. And so I threw out there, I said, hey, 9-3 right now. K-State fans, would you take this or would you roll the dice if I gave you the opportunity right now? And it was like 80% people just wanted to roll the dice. So, I mean, the fan base is pretty confident right now, maybe a little bit more confident than I am. But I think they still will be a team that competes at least for a Big 12 championship.
I feel bad for you guys. You don't have Oklahoma on the schedule this year. That's a free win for y'all. That's not there anymore.
I know. Boy, you talk about a nice little kiss on the way out the door. Not only missing K-State, but that entire Oklahoma schedule. I'm not sure that there's a Power 5 team playing a weaker schedule this year than the Sooners.
No, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Well, John, this has been a ton of fun, man. Really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for joining us, and hopefully we get the chance to talk soon.
Absolutely. Anytime, BK.
All right, that concludes our Kansas State preview and our Big 12 preview series here on Texas Sports Unfiltered. Please like this video and please subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Thanks so much for watching.